The next briefing is on the framework of Ukrainian media center of reforms, and we will discuss this status of state enterprises reform in Ukraine and top 100 state-owned enterprise analytical survey. And it's my pleasure to invite Mr. Adomas, Auditskas, Senior Advisor to the Minister of Economic Development and Trade of Ukraine, Andriy Bespyatov, Managing Director from Dragon Capital, and Onyshchenko, Director Business on business consulting from PricewaterhouseCoopers. And ladies and gentlemen, as you might know, the Ministry of Economic Development and Trade has launched reform on of state enterprises, and our objective is to review how the state manages its enterprises. First of all, why do we need this reform? We have 1,123 companies which continue to work, and some other 1,500 which do not work, while in other countries there are much lesser number of state companies, and this is because they clearly understand that the state cannot efficiently manage state companies, and private sector, private business manages companies much more efficient. That's why our objective is to increase efficiency on the one side and to privatize those companies which are more inefficient and which efficiency we cannot ensure. Of course, we are backed up by other ministries, by IMF, BRR, OECD, and other sponsor missions, and our objective is to improve corporate management in our companies. McKinsey analysis showed that when there is a good corporate management, raises the price of the company by 23%. The second is to raise salaries and wages for the CEOs of state enterprises, because if the salary is not related to the to the operational indices of the company, the CEO remains inefficient. That is, the salary should be at the level approximately equal to CEOs of budget companies. The third aspect is a transparent selection process for CEOs of state companies. We have launched transparent competition where we have representatives from NGOs, from donors. And this committee advises on the major appointments. This week they made decision on the director of Ukr gas production company. As to privatization, it should be transparent, and in order to ensure this transparency, we should collect as detailed information as possible about the company. Why transparency is so important? It is important because when we have very detailed information on the company, then it is very difficult to build up corruption schemes. Look at the private, the openly quoted companies like Statoil, and this is a state company, but there is a big bulk of open information about this company, and you can compare this its operational indicators with the other companies working in the same sector, even with private companies, and understand whether the company is efficient or not. That's why we are so much concentrated on transparency. We have, in order to do this, we have developed our survey, top 100 state-owned enterprises, where we collected information including financial, including operational data about these enterprises. The problem with those companies, unfortunately, is that they were not audited. That's why we have launched a new initiative on carrying out audit of all those top 100 companies. I am very grateful to PwC, to Dragon Capital, to the UK government, to Soros Foundation in Ukraine. They all assisted us in our work, and we believe that we will continue regular service about 100 state-owned enterprises. And now I would like to give the floor to representative of Dragon Capital, who will describe in more detail the findings of the survey. Good afternoon. As a representative of Dragon Capital, I should describe that we were addressed by the Ministry of Economic Development requesting the analytical survey of state-owned enterprises. Since we are experts in this issue, we have been doing similar work for private companies for a number of years in a row, and we have huge experience how the companies which are preparing for IPO, etc., how they should be analyzed. And when we were approached by the Ministry of Economy, we immediately communicated several messages and objectives. So one of the main messages is that we have relatively big number of state-owned enterprises with assets which could be attractive, but they are not known. They are not known to potential investors, and actually all people who might be interested, beginning from investors and ending with ordinary people, can review this information. It is about operational indicators, there is description of the company. That's why we had to collect all necessary statistical data about its operational indicators, about its profits, revenues, etc. That's why we concluded agreement with PricewaterhouseCoopers and with the Ministry of Economic Development. We took 3 companies in order to look at them more carefully. So we took 30 companies and amount top 100. The weight of those companies was at the level of 90%. Actually, we can state that those 30 companies, they represent almost 100% of Ukrainian state-owned enterprises. Also, we analyzed the sectors where those companies work in order to develop recommendations as to the most promising sectors and determine the most promising companies. in that top 30 companies for whom we carried out very detailed analysis, the majority were representing three sectors: energy, oil and gas, and infrastructure. So these were Naftogaz, Energatom, and Ukrainian Railway Company. And we believe that we had to pay more attention to those companies because the weighted share of those companies in the state owned enterprises was the biggest. It was a big challenge for us to collect all necessary information. Even being professionals, we found out it was rather difficult to get necessary information, and we understood that for ordinary peoples it was next to impossible to find those figures, to collect them somewhere. That's why I believe this survey is a huge contribution to development of transparency in today's Ukraine. Here we for the first time show information about enterprises which belong to all Ukrainians. We will submit this information to the Ministry of Economic Development, and I believe that this is a good idea which is planned for a long-term perspective. Now I'd like to give the floor to Ms. Anna Onyshchenko. I'm Director of on Business Consulting, PwC. I'm Anna Onyshchenko. So this was the initiative of the ministry, and specifically this was made upon request of the task force working on reform of state sector enterprises. This was supported by the UK government based on the UK-UA reform support project for Ukraine, and this was also supported by PwC. Today, from my colleagues, you have heard the message that this survey is not a declaration. This is an actual demonstration of the government openness, and this is an obvious demonstration of the of how these enterprises are managed. On the one hand, on the other hand, Ukrainian citizens can get consolidated information about 100 enterprises, which amount to 80% of the assets, state-owned assets, and this is also a demonstration of the government's effort to communicate the reform, what has been done and what should be done in the future. Also, there is a good mechanism for the civil society to supervise the government, what promises are implemented and what are not. And preparing a report what could be interest about objects which could be interesting for potential investors. We realized that potential investors are actually stakeholders of this process, but the information represented in this survey will be interesting for any investor looking at Ukraine as a possible destination for investment. For us, for analysts, it was a challenge not just to show figures, but to provide some recommendations. And in terms of recommendations, it might be interesting for the CEOs of state-owned enterprises. At the end of each section, at the end of each chapter, you can see the threats and opportunities for each sector development and specific recommendations for each company about strategic improvements which could be done in order to become more efficient and more profitable. The information input should be, of course, improved. Only a smaller part of the enterprises which are showed here are subject to the audit in general, and less than 10 companies, only less than 10 companies are subject to international audit. And I believe that in the future our data reflected in the survey will be much improved, and our expectation is that the future such surveys will be based upon the materials of international audits done for the companies. In other countries, excuse me, they implement the OECD countries methodology. In Lithuania, they have very similar tool. They started from 40-page survey, and now they have more than 100-page survey of state-owned enterprises. The ministry plans to continue this initiative, plans to publish this information in the future on quarterly basis and on annual basis. Thank you, Anna. Dear colleagues, do you have any questions? And please mention to whom directly you want to ask questions. Taras Kachka, Ukrainian Media Center of Reforms. To understand the context, the survey shows the amount of work to be done. Now my question, in your infographic shows the net losses about 100 billion hryvnia. Whether out of that survey you can understand which enterprise will benefit most from changing the managerial approach, like Antonov enterprise or whatever, whether you plan to implement any pilot project on application of the recommendations listed in your survey. Thank you for your question. I will divide it into separate answers. This is the first survey which is published in a rather specific moment when we experience a huge devaluation of hryvnia. That's why those companies which took lending in foreign currency, they showed additional losses. And as for regular work, then the ministry advised us to check the profitability of the companies, and we found out that in some companies profitability is not bad, and with minor improvements they are able to realize the potential. Of course, there are no companies without problems. But there are companies which minor efforts could become real competitors to the private sector companies. This was a positive surprise for us to see this. Ivan Verstyuk, Business UA. Whether you have any information about evaluation of those state assets which are being prepared for privatization. The assessment is carried out by the State Property Fund, and we should request this information from them. We have not received any reference information from them. There are just general figures about 117 billion revenues to the budget from privatization, but I cannot comment on the exact split. The privatization process has just started, and the State Property Fund issue, they stated that part of state enterprises will remain under state management, and nevertheless, the Prime Minister several times mentioned that the ministers should not manage state enterprises. How do you see this in practice? That's a good comment, and I agree with the Prime Minister that the ministries should not manage any state enterprises, any assets, state assets. The companies, even state-owned companies, should be run by professionals, by professional managers, like Ukrainian Railway Company, Naftogaz. These are companies which will remain the state property and belong to the government for a long period of time. And when we look at other countries, we see that they are run either by special agencies or by holding companies. And now we are thinking how to centralize state-owned enterprises in Ukraine. Either this will be holdings or some other models. What is extremely important, if we choose holding companies as manager of assets, state-owned enterprises, then the management of this holdings should be very transparent in order to prevent worsening in transparency. That is, we should establish as transparent corporate management for those holdings as possible. Any further comments? Then I have a question for you. What will be the strategy of the ministry in relation to the efficient state-owned enterprises? What will you do with efficient state-owned enterprises? All the companies should be profitable. The state should not be without profit, and that's why we do not split between profitable and non-profitable state-owned companies. The delineation line is between strategic companies and non-strategic companies. Of course, there are such strategic companies as railway company, Naftogaz, and they should be profitable and remain in state property. Taras, a question. In is your survey in open internet access? Now we're developing internet website, and on that website you will see not just this survey but other information about state-owned enterprises. Very soon this website will become operational, and I hope that journalists will review this information and comment on it. And now this survey could be found on the Ministry of Economic Development website. In what languages? In Ukrainian and English. Thank you. Dear colleagues, as of today, the working day is over. The schedule for tomorrow will be on our website.